And so then, it turned out that the creature is actually one of your brothers. And then, they went away with it because they were afraid of the shark guy you were talking about earlier. And then, we found this girl inside of a hole. And we're still not sure what's going on with her, but Catherine is very, very suspicious about the story going on about the creature now. And then, that's when you woke up and we found you. Or, I found you. Catherine didn't do anything. She's still with the girl in the hole. Anyways, that's what's been going on so far. I'm gonna go back to the hole now. You can join us if you want later, after you finish a video or something like that. I don't know. Goodbye. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Strange Wonders. As always, I'm your host, Mr.G. Apparently, I have to go investigate something, but since I've already prepared this video, I think I'm gonna finish this first before I go investigate what they want. So, let's get into it. Today, we're talking about the eye. Dobintonia madagascariensis. That's a mouthful. Anyway, despite its appearances looking like a weird, drowned rat squirrel thing with mange, the eye isn't related to either rats or squirrels. Instead, this guy is a primate, believe it or not. Yeah, it's a primate, so this thing is closer to you than it is to rats. Yep, this thing's in our family tree. And we are permanently stuck with it that way. So, enjoy. Okay, that's enough mocking this thing's appearance. Let's get into it. Now, you might have noticed that an eye has weird bony fingers with a really long middle finger. And those fingers are their primary method of getting food. Eyes are omnivorous. For the most part, they have standard primate diets of fruit and insects. Although how they get insects is where those fingers come into play. You see, when it comes across a hole that has insects in it that would normally be too big to stick your hand in, the eye will instead stick its longest finger down the hole and drag out the bugs so it can eat them. Yay! Huh. That's apparently all there really is to say about eyes without getting into human relations. And this video is very short. You know what? As a bonus, let's talk about the eye's relatives. Well, main group, actually. That's right. In this special episode of Mr. G's production, Strange Wonders, we're talking about the entire eye group that it belongs to, the lemurs. Now, when it comes to primates, people are usually only aware of the two big groups, you know, apes and monkeys. However, what most of your science teachers don't tell you is that the world of primates is a lot bigger than that. In addition to apes and primates, there's also the tarsiers, which I previously made a video on, the lorises, and of course, the lemurs. Just by looking at lemurs, you can tell that they're a pretty ancient group of primates. Since, well, yes, there are some lemurs that look like your typical idea of a primate, other lemurs look like relics of a bygone age. And, that's actually not far from the truth. You see, when it comes to primates, some of the earliest ones actually would have looked very similar to lemurs. Now, they weren't lemurs themselves, but rather, they had a resemblance to lemurs. Now, because of that, there are some people out there who claim that lemurs are the ancestors of primates, but that's not true. But rather, the closest analogy I can think of for this is like, the Neanderthal situation. You see, a lot of people like to claim that Neanderthals are the ancestors of Homo sapiens, but in actuality, Homo sapien and Homo neanderthalis were just two species in the same genus. Neither one of them evolved into each other. Yeah. Instead, the reason for the lemur's more primitive look is the fact that unlike monkeys and apes, they didn't really need to evolve any further from their current position. So as such, they kept their ancient look. Now, as pretty much anyone can tell you, lemurs only live on the island nation of Madagascar. But how the lemurs got to Madagascar is actually a pretty hot debate in terms of evolutionary biologists. The main issue being that the closest fossil relatives of lemurs didn't come from Africa, they actually came from India. So the problem scientists have to figure out is to figure out how these guys got from India to a country off the coast of Africa. So over the years, many theories have been proposed. One of the oldest, and also one of the most ridiculous in hindsight, was the Lemuria Theory. You see, this one guy proposed a theory that there was actually a sunken continent well, landmass, really. I don't know if it would count as a continent or country, called Lemuria, which is where lemurs came from. Supposedly, this landmass was in the middle of the Indian Ocean, and it would have connected India to Madagascar, and therefore the lemurs could have walked over to Madagascar, but then flooding caused the country to become sunken beneath the waves. This theory eventually got discredited, mostly because there is no evidence of any former land masses underneath the Indian Ocean. Now, granted, sunken continents are an entirely real phenomenon, just look up the Doggerlands. But there's no evidence that one of those happened with Madagascar and India. And nowadays, the current theory is that a bunch of primitive lemurs ended up on natural rafts and ended up in Madagascar due to drifting. But we may never know what really happened. Now, island wildlife is a very fascinating subject to talk about, since when you're so isolated from all other wildlife, you end up taking some interesting forms. I've already mentioned the Komodo dragons, and how they originally started out as small lizards who eventually evolved into apex predators due to the fact that the islands they lived on needed one. And there's also the dodo bird, which originally started out as a flying species of pigeon, eventually ended up on an island of no predators, and so forth lost the need to fly. Lemurs are a similar case. Since the island of Madagascar didn't really have any other wildlife on it, lemurs ended up taking on all kinds of niches, and they very quickly diversified. Some examples include the mouse lemur, which is actually the world's smallest primate. There's Safika lemurs, which move around by jumping. And of course, there's the famous ring-tailed lemur, which looks like a weird hybrid between a monkey and a raccoon. Now, unlike most island wildlife, it's not all fun and games for lemurs. You see, while the lemurs were diversifying, there was another group of placental mammals that had also come to Madagascar, except they weren't diversifying into fruit eaters, they were diversifying into predators. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you the Fossa. Yeah, this guy has its own card, but I can't really give it its own video, and there's nothing really else I can combine it with, so I'm talking about it here. Why not? Anyway, the Fossa is a relative of the mongoose, and, just like the lemur, it ended up on the island of Madagascar, and since the island needed a predator, it took on a more cat-like appearance and mannerisms in order to hunt the lemurs. Yeah, that's really all I have to say. See why I didn't give this thing its own video? Now let's look at the cards. Let's start with the Fossa since it's from an earlier series. This card is one of those cards that seems fine, but then on the back it makes a claim that is just wrong. It claims that Fossa have been known to take down cows, which is, I don't know if this has happened or not. I can't find a source for this, and it just doesn't sound right. There hasn't really been any lethal attacks by Fossa on human. You really think they can take down something like a cow? And secondly, it claims that they're related to mongooses and weasels, even though those two species are unrelated. Mongoose and weasels are not part of the same family, so therefore you really can't be related to both of them that closely. 8 out of 10. On the other hand, get it because I have long... Okay, that was a bad joke, I apologize. On the other hand, though, the II card is pretty good. I can't find any errors here, so yeah, 10 out of 10 for the II. Now let's talk about human relations. People don't care about Fossa. That's all for them. And for lemurs, people love lemurs. More specifically, ringtail. People could care less about the other lemurs. Especially the II. In Madagascar, the II is actually considered an omen of bad luck. And it's said that if an II points its middle finger at you, then that means that you're cursed to die. Unfortunately, this fear has led to the slaughter of the poor little lemur, but luckily there are conservation efforts to save it and the other endangered lemurs out there. Currently, the main threat to lemurs is deforestation. Or is it deforestation? I don't know how to pronounce it. Luckily, though, lemurs are one of those animals that pretty much no one wants to go extinct, so therefore lemurs are found in all sorts of zoos, although, again, they're mostly ring-tailed lemurs. Okay, how about on a brighter note, we look at some lemur depictions in media. Now, obviously, since the film series takes place on the titular country, the Madagascar series has featured plenty of lemurs. But the most prominent ones are the king of the lemurs, King Julian, who's a ringtail, his right-hand man Maurice, who's an eye, although he's so stylized he barely resembles one. And there's Mort the mouse lemur, who despite looking young is actually like 40 years old or something like that. Also in the TV show, he's obsessed with feet. Oh yeah, Madagascar is also probably the only piece of media in existence that knows that Fusa exists, so good for you. In addition to Madagascar, there's also the Pokemon series, which features the Pokemon Persimmon, who commendably enough is not based on the ringtail, but actually seems to be based on the ruffed lemur. There is also the PBS Kids show Zaboomafoo, which featured a puppet Safika lemur as one of its hosts. And confusingly enough, Disney's Dinosaur featured Safika lemurs. Yeah, these guys have always confused me with their inclusion. Why are there lemurs in a dinosaur movie? Yes, I am aware that very, very, very primitive lemurs lived near the end of the dinosaur's age. But they did not look like modern-day Safika lemurs. Why are there just lemurs in a movie about dinosaurs? Did they feel like they needed some sort of human representation in this movie? So they were like, oh, well, we can't just have humans. That would be inaccurate. I know, let's have lemurs. Oh yeah, let's not forget that this movie literally has a scene where all the lemurs burn to death because of an asteroid strike. Which, according to game theory, actually makes this a contender for Disney's highest kill count. I am at a loss for words. Let's move on before I go insane. Well, that's all for this episode of Strange Wonders. I think I gotta go investigate what the strange thing is. Next time we're talking about electric fish. Goodbye.